As Grenada celebrates its Independence Day, it marks not only a historic moment in the country's past, but also an opportunity to reflect on its current progress and look towards the future. On this 51st year of independence, I am honored to sit down with the Prime Minister of Grenada, Dickon Mitchell. Prime Minister, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
This was without a doubt a very challenging year as a result of Hurricane Beryl. So perhaps we can start there. More than 6 months post-Hurricane Beryl, can you provide an update on Grenada's recovery efforts and how the country has rebuilt in the aftermath of a hurricane which devastated Carriacou and Petite Martinique?
Well, I think the recovery has gone well enough. There's some areas where I think we've done very well. There are some areas where I think just because of the scope of the challenge and some of the logistical issues you have with small islands, it's going to take a lot longer. So I would say in areas where we've done well, the immediate response, I think, was quite satisfactory, and we had a lot of help from our regional and international partners, from the CDEMA to the RSS to all of our brothers and sisters within the Carriacou community itself, and then our international partners. So that really helped us with the immediate response. In terms of the recovery itself, we've been able to reopen schools fully, notwithstanding that there's some still schools that were completely destroyed. So school is up and running, and that's obviously a big issue for us because we want to make sure that young people don't miss out on the opportunity to continue their education. We moved students who went to TMR Community College. They're fully in Grenada, and the government is assisting financially with covering both the cost of school itself, providing them laptops, some financial support in terms of apartments, and so on. So that is going well. We've begun to rebuild and repair some of the health centers. So again, from a public health standpoint, that is going well. The cleanup effort has been amazing. We had a project called Project Pristine, which essentially aggregated all of the debris, the galvanized, the natural vegetation, the wood, the white goods. So that has gone really, really well, including the marine environment, because we had a lot of damaged sunken boats. We've been able to get them out of the coastal areas. So that has, I think, made a tremendous difference in terms of what you see when you go to Carriacou and Petite Martinique. I mean, if you went there, and I know you were in the immediate aftermath of the damage, and you go back now, it's actually quite a different place. The major challenge is housing, because obviously to build homes, you need aggregates. All of the material has to be imported. We got a major challenge with labor because it's not just Carriacou that was impacted, obviously, Petite Martinique as well. And then you have the northern part of Grenada. So housing, even before the hurricane, was a challenge. It has been exacerbated. So that's the one area where obviously there's enormous work to be done still.
How many homes have you been able to rebuild so far?
Well, in some cases, I can't give you a definitive number. We've had, together with working with some of our partners, new homes that have just been built from scratch. We are working on looking at modular homes as well. And then we have a project Build Back Better. And then obviously you have roofing assistance where all of the homes are standing, but the roofs went. So I can't give you figures at this stage, but it's still an enormous amount of work to be done. We've worked well on rebuilding a lot of the government facilities like the police station, the magistrates court, because obviously we need those to function for Carriacou itself to function. Our development bank is working with some of the small businesses and so on in terms of providing grant and loan support so that they can come back on stream. But there's still some work to be done in that area as well. And obviously the marine sector, which we depend on. A lot of the yachts, as I said, sunk, and we pull them out for owners and so on. But thankfully, the marine sector is already back up and running. The airport has reopened, even though it's not fully back to where it was before. Our project to have night landing will continue. That's one of the projects that was halted as a result of that. The port is functioning, but there's still some damage to port infrastructure. So all in all, I would say we have recovered a lot faster, I think, than say 20 years ago when we were hit by Hurricane Ivan, because we've learned, I think, a lot of the lessons, and I think our regional partners are also better prepared to respond.
In what ways would you say that you've rebuilt with resilience in mind?
Well, right. So one of the things we're keen to make sure our citizens understand is that, particularly for housing, that if you don't build the homes to code, then you are essentially wasting your investment because you run the risk of the homes being easily damaged. So simple things like ensuring that there are hurricane straps in the roofing, ensuring that there are actual proper plans and that the engineering is properly done are some of the things we really focusing on. And that applies both for government buildings and for private homes. So the Planning Authority, which never had an office in Carriacou, now has one, because we want to make sure it's not just with approving plans, but making sure that the building code is complied with. We've had a lot of workshops in Carriacou to speak to builders as to what we expect and what is required, and we'll continue doing so because you have to make sure to change that culture, that people continue to obey and get the training necessary to build to standard and to build code. And I've actually been going to Carriacou myself and inspecting some of the reconstruction together with our engineering teams from the Ministry of Infrastructure to make sure that people recognize that we are serious about encouraging them to build to code. I think in terms of agriculture and the environment, that is still a work in progress, but what we are seeking to do is to make sure that we can build back the mangroves and at the same time also build, in a sense, what I call economic crops between the mangroves, like coconut trees. We've ordered about 30,000 coconut trees from Guyana. We expect them shortly. So the aim here is not just rebuild the mangroves, but also provide economic sustenance by having economic crops like coconuts. In terms of our environmental cleanup, we bought significant machinery and actually bought it so that we can have access to it, so that going forward we have greater capacity to respond to natural disasters and to be able to do our own cleanup much faster than having to wait, because that's the challenge we face. We didn't have the kind of equipment that was required. We want to give the Solid Waste Management Authority the capacity, both in Carriacou and in Grenada, and we believe even regionally, to assist our brothers and sisters as well. So we bought some pretty expensive equipment. They're in Carriacou now. And if you go to Petite Martinique, for example, it shows what can be done with proper responses to the environmental disaster. So we completely cleaned up the playing field, which essentially we were using to dump all of the galvanized and the broken homes and the white goods and so on. And we've been able to clean that up, ship everything off island. We're working with a company from out of Miami that is involved in recycling of white goods and galvanized and so on. So the aim ultimately as well is to actually reduce the size of our landfills as well by using that equipment to help with the recycling process and the taking some of the goods off island. So we hope that not just for Grenada, but for within the OECS, we can share with our brothers and sisters both our processes as well as the equipment to assist with some of the waste management that comes from things like natural disasters.
What has been the most significant challenge in the restoration process?
Capacity, because we rely a lot on volunteers, but outside of that, when you have a sort of multi-island challenge, you've got Petite Martinique, you've got Carriacou, you've got Grenada. I'll give you a basic example. In the immediate aftermath of the hurricane, we were delayed in going to Carriacou because the seas were so rough. We didn't have a boat that was, in a sense, large enough to take us there because of the swells, and so it meant we had to wait. Luckily, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia offered a helicopter. We didn't have a helicopter here in Grenada. If we did, and assuming it hadn't been damaged, obviously we would have been able to get to Carriacou a lot easier. So the use of technology is important in building capacity, things like drones, long-range drones, so that we can assess the damage, be able to even drop medication or food, being able to have a helicopter. Luckily, a local Grenadian has since returned from the US and has invested in a helicopter business, so we believe things like that would help. So on the technology side, we need to improve our capacity to respond. But on the human resource side as well, we need greater capacity as well, because in terms of, as I said, construction or reconstruction, ensuring we have the engineering skill set in sufficient quantities is also important. I think for small islands, we are going to have to pull our resources better to ensure that we can support each other in those sort of challenges, because the waste management issue, St. Vincent and the Grenadines also has that challenge. So I think working on ensuring that we build our capacity is something we have to, and our preparedness as well. For example, we would have had one central storage on mainland Grenada, but the bulk of the items were really needed in the north of the island. So it obviously meant we were now dealing with significant logistical issues. If we can decentralize our storage, then it makes it easier for us to, for example, respond to the folks in the north of the island or the south, depending on where you have greater impact. So planning out some of those things and making sure we have the drills, making sure we don't take it for granted, is some of the things we also need to do to be better prepared.
And I'm curious, how long do you think it will take to rebuild?
It's difficult to say, but I think we want to take a sustained and systematic approach to the housing. So certainly, I think in the next 18 to 24 months, we should see significant improvement, and we are trying to avoid a one-shoes-fit-all approach. So between modular homes, between importing the labor, between trying to improve our storage capacity on island to bring aggregates, because that's one of the challenges we have. We are working on all of those things to see how we can accelerate the housing response and recovery effort.
And we'll take a break here. When we return, we're talking about this year's independence celebrations. Stay with us.
Tell the world we are Grenadians.
Three islands united as one, blessed with the strength to carry on. We're more than just that island in the sun. Tell the world we are Grenadians.
As the country recovers and looks to the future, one of its key priorities is building more bridges between Grenada and Africa. This move to return to their roots was evident in the plans for this year's independence activities, which included participation by the richest man in Africa. Prime Minister, this year's independence keynote speaker is none other than Aliko Dangote, a well-known businessman from Africa. A timely selection given that Grenada continues to strengthen its relationship with Africa. This government, you, have prioritized fostering the relationship with Africa, looking to Africa as a trade partner, despite the fact that Grenada, and really the Caribbean as a whole, barely trades with Africa. What do you see as the key barriers to trade between our regions? And why is it so important for Grenada and the Caribbean to strengthen these ties?
Well, I think first historically, our ancestors are from Africa, in large part in the Caribbean. And they came here, obviously, forcibly. And it is their resistance and their resilience that, to a large extent, built many of our European colonizers. And the Caribbean, to a large extent, have become independent nations over the last 50 to 60 years. And despite that, we have not really pursued rekindling and, frankly, discovering our roots. And so I think just from a cultural and a heritage perspective, it's important for us to foster ties with the African continent. From a global perspective, I think we can all accept that black people anywhere in the world, including in Africa, are often the most downtrodden, the poorest, and the most taken advantage of. And that's the direct legacy of slavery and colonialization of the African continent and, frankly, the African diaspora, whether it's in North America, whether it's in South Central America and the Caribbean. So I think for black people to rise everywhere, that connectivity with Africa, and that ensuring that the economic ties and the trade ties and the people and cultural ties between Africa and its diaspora, wherever, is strengthened deliberately and intentionally. So I think that's the first point. But the second point is there's no question that Africa, from an economic perspective, is in a sense the next great continent that needs to rise. And it's begun to do so. And you see people like Mr. Dangote as a prime example of this. So it's important for us to ensure that when we talk about role models and we talk about setting examples, that we actually look to persons who've done so in Africa and who are respected in Africa and globally. And there's no better personality, in my mind, or success story than someone like Mr. Dangote. And despite that success, he's humble. He is very polite. And as you can see, he's full of wisdom, particularly for young people. And I think for us in the Caribbean, we need to highlight black role models that are successful globally so that we do not let the limitations of our size impact our ambition. So that's one of the key reasons. But purely on the economic front, we absolutely need to ensure that we can trade more with Africa. And that means from a logistical point of view, from air access, from sea access, and from looking at the things that we can get from Africa and the things that Africa can get from us. If we are trading with far places as China, there's absolutely no reason why we can foster trade with Africa, which is actually much closer. So for us, we think it's important to begin this sort of deliberate planning of our economic, social, political, geopolitical ties. And that's the reason for deliberately pursuing better and closer bilateral and multilateral relations with Africa, and particularly on the economic and social space as well.
You've announced the Afro-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum, which will be hosted in Grenada this July. What are some of the tangible outcomes expected from hosting this forum, particularly in terms of trade and investment opportunities, both locally and regionally?
We really expect and are optimistic that there'll be a greater investment both coming from Africa to the Caribbean and from the Caribbean to Africa. One of the things we underappreciate in the Caribbean is how much liquidity that exists in the Caribbean. There are billions of dollars sitting in our banks, in our credit unions in the Caribbean, and we are not actually investing it outside of the Caribbean or in emerging markets. And Africa, given the 1.4 billion, is a prime market for us, for our music, our creativity, our arts, our food, our tourism, IT services, and similar. The population of Africa, the average age is 19 to 20 years old. So that explosion is there waiting to happen, and we need to make sure that we take advantage of this. And I think when you look at fashion and design and music, there's enormous capacity there. And I think we have to make sure, therefore, that we deliberately pursue the investment opportunities, the financial payment, the trade platforms, using technology so that we can overcome some of the traditional barriers that have kept us back. So the forum will be the 9th to the 11th of July. We're expecting as much as 800 delegates. It's the 4th forum. Previously, it was held inaugurally in Barbados, then Guyana, then the Bahamas. Bahamas was the largest. So obviously, size-wise, we're a little smaller, so we want to make sure that we curate the event so that everyone has a wonderful experience. But we're looking forward to having political leaders, business leaders, both nationally and provincially from Africa coming, as well as the diaspora. We expect high-level political, business, academic interest from the Caribbean, and particularly we really want to encourage our creatives, our musicians, arts and crafts, small manufacturers to come and really look at the opportunities that there are for trade and investment. We also want to see how we can pursue the travel links, because this is absolutely vital. But I think the more people understand that it's actually not that far. In some regards, traveling over the African continent itself is longer than traveling from the African continent to the Caribbean. So we really want to demonstrate that it's not that far. But what we need to do is see how we can change the mindset so that people pay attention to how we can actually invest in our own airlines or support African airlines or Caribbean airlines to actually look at altering their routes rather than just the traditional hub of London or New York City or Miami. And I think we see what's happening in the north in terms of the approach to immigration and to quote-unquote non-belongers. And I think, therefore, we should use the opportunity to see how we can encourage our businessmen, particularly in the travel space, to invest in craft, both sea and air, to encourage trade and the movement of people between Africa and the Caribbean. And I will add, strategically, because we're between Africa and South America, it's a great opportunity for us to be able to bridge that, to be the bridge that actually encourages economic growth and development amongst those two continents. There's a significant diaspora in South America that I think also is not seen or heard sufficiently. And we need to encourage their visibility as well by fostering the partnerships amongst ourselves.
I'll see you in July. Thank you, Prime
Indeed,
Minister.
I look forward to seeing you. Thank you.
And happy Independence Day to Grenada, Carriacou and Petite Martinique. Thank you for joining us.
Tell the world we are Grenadians.
Three islands united as one, blessed with the strength to carry on. We're more than just that island in the sun. Tell the world we are Grenadians.
Going higher, 50 years we blessed with force.